I've mentioned it a couple of times, but this year will truly be an exciting one for Being Bookish. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak with Hannah Brohm about her debut novel, Love and Other Brain Experiments, which is actually released this coming Thursday if you are listening on release day, the 12th of February. It's the perfect book for anyone who loves STEM romances by Ali Hazelwood. A little bit of science, a little bit of fake dating, a little forced proximity, and a lot of chemistry between two people who could be classified as academic enemies. I'm Ray, an unapologetic bookworm, introvert, self-confessed hermit, and long-time depression sufferer. This is my quiet space to share thoughts as I make my way through an ever-growing to-be-read pile, and this book was part of it, though only for a brief period. Join me as I explore stories one book at a time with 100% honest and completely spoiler-free reviews, and that does not change with this episode. Welcome to Being Bookish, and please enjoy your stay. And I am joined today by Hannah Brohm to talk about her debut novel, Love and Other Brain Experiments, which comes out in the UK on the 12th of February. So not too long to wait. This is a STEM novel. So if you are a fan of Ali Hazelwood, you will be familiar with the genre and the book type. And I would definitely recommend you go out and either pre-order your copy or buy it on release day. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to do this.
It's my pleasure. So do you want to, I always start by saying, do you want to tell everybody about the book, the storyline, but obviously don't give away the twist and don't give away the ending, because I like it when people read the book for themselves and find out all the wonders that I got to discover when I read it for me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I love that too. No spoilers. But I'm happy to tell you a bit about the book. So, Love and Other Brain Experiments follows our main character Frances, who is a scientist. And in the beginning of the book, she travels to a conference in New York, and her research contract is running out. So the conference is very important to her because she's hoping to network there and to find her next position. One of the issues, though, is that this event is organized by her ex, who has become mega successful in the meantime since they broke up, and she hasn't spoken to him in 5 years. And the next, almost bigger problem is that her rival, another scientist whose name is Lewis, is also in attendance at the conference. And as they get into an argument, their colleagues think that they're having some flirty chemistry and assume that the two are a couple. And they miss the moment of clearing up the misconception. And because once the news have spread, it would be detrimental to their careers to admit that they lied. They now have to keep up appearances and pretend that they're in a relationship. And both of them know that for any scientist, faking data is a no-go, but fake dating might just be the solution they need.
I love that. I think that for me, this was it was full of the tropes that you find comforting. So we have enemies to lovers, we have fake dating, we do have at the very beginning forced proximity, because obviously not giving anything away, because this happens right at the very beginning. The meet cute is on an aeroplane, and we have a nervous flyer and someone who wants help but is not the person that they really want to help. And I loved that there was immediate chemistry between them, even though it was very sarcastic on the plane. And we clearly see from the very start that Frances is incredibly dedicated, very intelligent, and so determined. But she's been let down by so many things. Obviously, her funding is coming to an end and she's trying to find new funding. And then there's that whole thing with her ex-boyfriend, Jacob, being so successful. And I loved the way that everything sort of blended together to get to the point where she's almost reluctantly forced to go on the whole fake dating thing. And her sister is an enabler.
Yes.
Massively so. But also Lewis doesn't seem to be, though he is very sort of certain in certain ways, he comes across as quite rigid. He is happy enough to go along with it, which is I found quite pleasant, quite not different, because obviously if he didn't go along with it, the whole plot would have fallen apart. But at the same time, he seems to be keen, and there's that underlying chemistry thing, as though he's pulling her pigtails because he has a crush on her.
Yeah. There's also something that happened in the past, I think, that makes him maybe a bit more likely to help her. But you're right that the chemistry is probably the main reason that he wants to help her out, and he's willing to go along.
And obviously we have his friend Brady as well, who is my kind of person, in that they are absolute and utter nerd.
Yep. Correct. Brady was very fun to write. I really enjoyed all of the scenes where she makes an appearance and kind of sometimes derails the situation a little bit as well.
Oh, she seems to be so young and bouncy, and very much not necessarily taking everything seriously until it has to be. And I think everybody needs a friend like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're a neuroscientist yourself. So was this influenced at all by real life or circumstances that you've witnessed rather than experienced?
Yeah, definitely. So I was in grad school when I started writing this book, and I actually started writing it a little bit before Ali Hazelwood's first book came out. So I was just I was always reading a lot of romance, and during that time, I really enjoyed how much comfort it brought, but also what it kind of insight into other people's jobs, different life contexts, kind of like it plants you in that very different life. And I thought it would be a great idea to maybe try something out like that with a context that I was very familiar with, which was neuroscience. So I started writing it, and basically took a lot of the things that I was encountering. Like I was going, maybe not at the time because it was still the tail end of the pandemic, but conferences were something that I was familiar with. Having conversations with people online that I'd never seen in my life before, but that were judging my research, was something that I was also getting more and more used to. So all of these elements were something that I thought of, and I tried to figure out how I could put them together in a way that would be a nice, fun backdrop for a romance novel like this. And one thing that I really didn't expect, but that ended up happening, is that even when things frustrated me in grad school during that time, writing the book and trying to figure out how I could maybe spin them in a way that they would contribute to the narrative made me help me make light of the situations, and helped me also with my mental health at that time. So that was kind of a positive effect of it. But yeah, overall, I basically took a lot of the context that I was familiar with and then set this story in that context.
So it was an escape as well as a kind of saving grace. It gave you that moment of, right, well, this is what happened. Let's see how I can spin it to make it less, my head's going to explode any moment.
Definitely. Yeah.
I worked in a science field, but I'm not a scientist. I worked in pharmaceutical testing and and pharmaceutical publishing, and went to a lot of conferences and things. And boy, can they drink and party.
Yeah.
That's something that I'd never expected. But also they are really mentally tough, even if you aren't somebody who understands everything. And I imagine the pressure to write your abstracts and your papers can be massively overwhelming. And one of the things that came across in the book is the fact that there is a lot of scientific revelation in the book. There is the scientific, obviously, our characters are all scientists in a very demanding field. But there was at no point did I sit there thinking, well, I'm really stupid because I don't understand this. And I think that can be a danger when you're looking at a subject that is so different. Well, not different, but very, very intense and specialized.
Yeah, it's very niche, right? So it's not necessarily something that we would encounter in day-to-day life. So that was actually one of my goals also, to try to figure out. So generally in grad school, I was always very interested in science communication. So I think I was anyways thinking a lot about how can, first of all, I kind of like transport the passion that I have for the field in a way, but also how can I make complex topics a bit more understandable or a bit more relatable for people who don't work on them every day? Because I feel like in general, the nice thing about science is that we find out all of these things, but what's the point in the end if we cannot tell people about these things, or if no one else really understands them, and if we can't communicate them? So one of my goals with the book was also to not only transport that or describe that passion, but also explain a few details maybe of that field and have readers kind of learn along the way in a way.
Yeah, because obviously
Yeah.
Francis is focusing on memories
Mhm.
and retaining them. So it's for things like Alzheimer's and dementia,
Yeah.
those things that everybody has experience of in some
Mhm.
way or other, but doesn't necessarily think about in that way. One of the things that you
Yeah.
explain in the book is the forming of memories and how they are
Mhm.
so, they're not different, but how they are incredibly, like you get that you pick them up on a daily basis without even realizing
Mhm.
it.
Yeah,
So
it's
as
kind
I
of
was going through my
incidental.
notes
Yeah.
today, I was writing out names and little summaries and things. And I realized that even though I read the book 3 months ago, I knew exactly without actually
Mhm.
going into deeper detail. Oh, I remembered these things.
That's great. Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing really stuck with me.
Mhm.
But it's something that you don't on a daily basis think about.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like a lot of that field of neuroscience that, well, Francis and Lewis and basically everyone else in the book is in, is that kind of way of trying to look from a scientific standpoint at processes that we go through in our day-to-day life, and to try to figure out in a lot of detail what is actually happening there and what goes wrong in when we see things like Alzheimer's, for example, what changes in that context. And that's also my research background, actually. So
Oh,
there I
wow.
was very, very close to, yeah, I didn't do research on Alzheimer directly, but the kind of topics or the discussions that they have about memory were things that I also encountered in my career, either because colleagues looked at them or because it was very, very close to my own research. So I think in that sense that I had a bit of a hiccup, let's say, as I was starting to write about these characters, because for me, I couldn't write them without exactly knowing what their research was about. And I knew that the very, very detailed, like what they would have written their PhD thesis about and all of these things, that I wouldn't bring them into the book because that would be too niche of a topic and too difficult to explain.
Yeah.
But for me personally, to understand them as characters, it was very important to know all of that.
So it led you down a rabbit hole or two.
Yes. Maybe too much of a rabbit hole. I could have stopped sooner and just gotten on with writing. Yeah.
Oh, research is something I think a lot of people are very familiar with. No matter what field they're in, you'll start with one thing. I do it with, it sounds so stupid. I do that with TV shows. I'll watch a TV
Mhm.
show and I'll see somebody and I'll think, oh, that person played such and such in that program. And then I'll go, oh, I wonder what they're doing now.
Yeah.
And then I start down, oh, they were related to that person. And all of a sudden, I haven't, what program's completely forgotten.
Yeah,
Because,
suddenly you know their star sign and I don't know which primary school they went to or
yeah,
something
and
like
which foot,
that.
which foot they kick with. It is so
Yeah.
random, but it is very much about the focus on memory and
Mhm.
observations and things like that. One of the things I really loved about this book, and it was something that I was reminded of when I was doing my research this afternoon, was the line accepted without revisions.
Mhm.
And that has so many meanings because obviously we have there, one of the main things that Francis is resentful of Lewis for is his constant critique, his peer
Mhm.
review of her papers. And when he says that to her, and he's talking about the paper, but he's also talking about her and their relationship.
Mhm.
And it means so much because it is very, very true. It is that moment of that's what love is. And I think
Mhm.
he actually says that accepted without revisions, isn't that what love is?
Mhm. Yep, that's yeah, correct. Yeah, he does kind of come back from it at a different point. They do discuss that statement a little bit further. But yeah, I was that was actually one of the things. So there's like this running joke within the scientific community that it barely ever happens that you get a paper accepted without revisions. I think I don't know anybody that has experienced that. There's always something to change, something to explain further. And more likely than not, your paper will be rejected and not accepted. But I just thought for him, I think so they're both very, very dedicated in their science. And for him, it's really kind of like a framework that he structures his life around, and something that he's had to fight to do quite a lot. So to me, it really made sense that he would think about love that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that obviously his family life is
Mhm.
something he's always had to battle to fight his corner, because none of
Yep.
his family will do it for him.
Yeah.
And maybe
yeah,
that has some bearing on why he is the way he is.
definitely, yeah. And I like in that moment as well how it's not only that he says it to Francis, but it also kind of prompts Francis to think a little bit more about him and what leads him to think that love is that way, or wish for him for love to be that way.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's these two characters have so much chemistry. Do you have any? I always sort of, when I'm reading a book, I can picture them very, very clearly in my head. They are rarely the images that are on the cover of the book. They are very rarely anything more than, oh, well, that person's got those features. And I will imagine everything like a film. Do you have any particular actors, musicians, or people in your life, though obviously don't release names of them because they might get bombarded, who inspired these characters and the way that you describe them, not their actual characteristics and their interests, but who they appeared to be on the surface?
So it's funny because I'm actually the opposite. I'm really, really bad at picturing things. I'm good at kind of imagining concepts in my head. So I can imagine the concepts of blue eyes, but I can't really picture faces so well. So it was actually quite important for me to have at least some photos or something pulled up on my screen so I could properly describe the characters. So the visual inspiration for Lewis is a Broadway actor that I really like. His name is Aaron Tveit. I don't know if you know him. He was in Les Miserables as well in the film ages ago, but he's still active. One of the ones where I saw him live actually was the Moulin Rouge stage production, and he sings very well. He is very attractive, and I also submitted kind of pictures of him to my team at both publishers when they asked me about visual inspiration. And I think especially on the American cover, you can see the resemblance a little bit. For Frances, it's a bit tricky because I think in terms of her, I don't really have a strong visual reference for her. I think maybe the actress that would come closest is Florence Pugh if she were a bit taller and had very curly hair. But I think that would probably be the closest one.
So there you go. There's the movie casting all done.
Yep.
But I think
one can dream.
I think that not everyone has that. I've got a few friends who are unable to visualize, and having the prompts, whether it's the film that they've watched, the TV series that's been on, or the fan castings they've seen on social media, it helps to get that image home.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I think US covers tend to be very, very different from the UK ones in that regard.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the cover process was actually very interesting for me because it kind of you provide sort of similar materials. Or in my case, I was asked to provide visual inspiration, character references, maybe covers that I liked. And it's kind of interesting to see how different people, what they do with that kind of information and how they then end up with a cover. And in my case, I was very surprised because both teams hadn't spoken to each other, but they both ended up with the characters grabbing each other's lanyards on the cover. Just in one case, it's Francis grabbing Lewis's lanyard, and then on the other cover, it's the other way around. And it was such a fun moment of kind of serendipity or something when I got both covers, and I was like, wow, this is so they landed on something very similar without talking about it in the meantime, because they wanted to develop them independently.
Well, that is that is interesting. I never thought about that, because obviously when well, there are differences, because depending on the publisher and depending on the type of book, the requirements or the requests are very different. So if you're, I mean, I don't imagine that they'd be asking you necessarily for character descriptions if you were writing a psychological thriller.
Yeah. True. That would be a bit creepy, maybe.
Just a little bit. But when they designed these covers, I mean, this one is, I know that not everybody does, but I do like the slightly cartoon animated style of this cover, because it's comforting. It's not, it gives me an idea of the story I'm going to be getting when I pick it up. And I'm a fan of the 1980s Bonkbuster. I have an entire shelf of Joanna Lindsay, and they are incredibly different, very specific covers. And they are totally different from the covers that you have today for any type of book. But this one has that feel of cozy, romantic, slightly funny, because you've got the smirk and you've got the expression on their faces that is very indicative, I think, of this type of book, and very, very clear on the type of characters that you're going to be reading about. I loved Frances's strength. She had a very decisive internal voice. Is that how you find? I mean, working as someone in the science field, it is very different to working as a man. I worked with, I worked with 11 different writers and editors in submitting papers. Primarily, I know the entire flipping process. It's such fun submitting papers and getting rejected multitude of times from Nature.
It happens to all of us.
But I wasn't writing them. I was just editing and sending them in, and it's so demotivating. But the most of the people I worked with were men.
Yeah. In my case, I had a few. So while I was doing my PhD, for example, my advisors, I had 7 advisors, which is a lot. If you try to make everyone kind of happy with whatever you're doing. I did have 2 female advisors as well. So, but most of my day-to-day was working together with men. Although I think in the general kind of like spectrum of science, neuroscience is still a little bit more balanced, just because you have a lot of the psychology angle, and psychology tends to be studied more often by women, or at least to be a bit more balanced. But in terms of Frances' voice, I think, that's something that I thought a lot about. Someone who's really determined in that setting, who's trying to work on pursuing her passion, but also kind of networking and be very aware of the people around her, and how she can work together with them. It made sense to me that she would be that kind of character, not necessarily people-pleasing or anything, but just very, very aware of any kind of like social interaction, social cues, and how she would also have to behave in those situations to come across the way that she wanted to, and to be respected but not over the top, and so on and so on. So I think that self-control is something that was very important for me to portray in her character.
Because it's something that you've experienced as well. I think that's...
Yes. Yeah, I think that one of the things that inspired me to put that in was that I would realize, so I have great friends within the academic field as well, but I had the feeling that whenever I was in meetings or in any kind of like slightly more stressful or more demanding situation within research, I wasn't really fully ever myself. In terms of, I mean, obviously you're always a little different in any kind of situation, because it's an interaction of your character with that situation. But I always had the feeling that I was kind of like pushing down like the bubbliness or like the enthusiasm for certain things in a certain way. And that made me think a lot about how she would then also behave in these kind of contexts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that did come across there, she was very careful. Though she wasn't so careful when she was with Lewis's parents.
Yep. That's true. But that was on purpose.
Maybe that was also a lot of the, I can't say this when I'm with the people that I need to respect me and like me. So I'm going to say it to these people who I don't like or respect.
I think that was, yeah, that's I think what also would set her apart from someone that is more of a general like people pleaser, because for her it's really just in the context where she knows it's important, whereas in other situations she doesn't really care so much whether people like her or not. It's just important for her to be respected and taken seriously within the scientific environment.
And obviously being with Lewis and his family, she realized what he was up against
Yeah.
on a daily basis, and it gave some clues as to why he was the way
Mm-hmm.
he was outside of his family situation.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see that. And obviously she's had to bite her tongue when she saw her ex-boyfriend with his
Mm-hmm.
fiance. And
Yeah.
Vivienne was lovely. She
Mm-hmm.
was obviously not at all what Francis had expected.
Yeah.
And all she kept on, I could see, I mean, you could see the cogs whirring when Francis and Vivienne met. But Vivienne had the kindness to actually say, oh, we're engaged and we live together.
Mm-hmm.
But it made her think, Francis, that is not Vivienne, of how this could have been her life.
Mm-hmm.
But she also had the awareness to say, well, actually, he didn't make me happy. He belittled me. There were moments where he showed support,
Yeah.
but it was always about him and his accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew that she'd never get the same support, or she wouldn't have the same drive if she'd stayed with him.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think for me it was actually Vivian and the whole dynamic. I knew from the start that I didn't want it to be this very clear cut. She's his new fiance, and now we have to be sort of against each other for some reason, right? Like I
Yeah.
definitely knew that I didn't want it to be that way, especially because they are two women that are both kind of pursuing career in the same field, so they actually have a lot of things in common. And it was important for me to explore that for them, but also to kind of respect the whole complexity of that situation, and that two people could also try to deal with that situation in a way that was not straightforward and simple and like a very kind of like crass reaction, but that there would be development as well. And it was very enjoyable to try to figure out how to achieve that and how to have them, like even the two, so Vivian and Francis, be in a way vulnerable with each other and try to find some kind of connection.
Because they both know it's an
Yeah.
awkward situation. They're not
Yeah.
unaware of it. And when they meet it for the first time, it's when she arrives at the conference, and there is this moment of awareness that this is the new me. And oh, she's working with him, she's doing all the same things that I did. And there was an honest moment where I sat there and thinking, is she going to say something about how badly it worked for her, or is she just going to she's an adult, we're both in the same world, we've both got exactly the same battles to fight, so I'm not going to do this, because it would make her look like the smaller person.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. I think I never had her in any of the drafts. I never had her say anything. I remember that in some of the drafts, especially the earlier ones that my editors saw first, they were kind of suspicious of Vivian because they thought something's gonna happen, maybe something's gonna. And for me, it was important to not have her come across as suspicious, but just the situation as a tense situation, a complex situation. But to really treat or have them both treat the situation as adults and not instigate any kind of drama. Yeah, that would make it maybe kind of more explosive, but in my eyes, a little bit less interesting or less appropriate for the situation, and also for their age and for their characters, like how they were otherwise behaving in the rest of the book.
Yeah, because they're both intelligent, sophisticated women who are not at the pinnacle of their career, but they are working towards it. So to have them act like brawling 18-year or 16-year-olds who liked the same boy would have been a total change in the tone of the book.
Yeah, and I think also I don't know when I came across that, but I don't know if it was in a conversation with a colleague or something, but I think I put that into the book as well, some kind of sentence about like you meet a lot of intelligent people in the field, but they're not necessarily always kind. And for me, it was really important to show that you can also progress and make advances in your career without stabbing down. And that's something that I wanted to kind of put into the different characters in different ways. So it was important for me to, to show that both Vivian and Francis could be kind in a way and not, talk behind each other's back or.
Because obviously we already had the mistrust with Lewis and Francis at the very beginning, where she's hugely resentful of the fact that she knows that he was a peer reviewer and he caused her so many problems with one of her papers.
Yes.
And she was already angry at him about that. So being
Exactly
attracted to him was kind of like this is a massive punch in the face. Why did you have to be so good looking? And why did I have to like you?
Yes. And why did you have to hold my hand when I was like panicking?
Yeah, so everybody saw it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's all about assumptions. One of the characters I think that is, for me, though we don't actually really see her, is Caro.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She is Francis's enabler, but she is also going through a lot of stuff on her own that she doesn't feel like she can talk to her sister about. And we get that this is the moment where you see, yes, Francis is quite well rounded. She is not so blinkered that she's not oblivious to things, but there are certain things that she hasn't got that awareness of, whether that's because she is so focused on herself or because people don't think they can talk to her about them. And that is all the situation with Caro and Leonard just having got married. So is that personal experience, or is that something someone said to you and they sort of said, oh, well, yeah, I really was completely blind to the fact that such and such had this issue? I mean, I've done it.
I think in my case, actually, the reason, one of the things in the first drafts, I didn't have them talk about the fact that Caro can't share a lot of what is going on in her life with her sister. But I did always have them in that kind of dynamic where Frances was always talking more to her sister about her problems than the other way around. And the way that I kind of set them up was actually, even though I don't think character-wise I'm very similar to Frances, just the things that they are passionate about, because Carol is very into books. She's a very bookish person. She works in the publishing industry. That kind of like dichotomy was something that I started thinking about, because I was like, well, in the science context, I've always been like a huge reader. I've been very into books, very into writing. Then I took a break. So I wanted to kind of put a little bit of me in both of these characters and these sisters and see how they play off each other in the ways that I sometimes have conversations with myself in my head almost. So I think one of the ways that whole dynamic then also came to be was also what I said before, that sometimes when I was really, really absorbed in the scientific field, I sometimes had the feeling that I wasn't giving that other side of myself a lot of space. So I tried to, not that this was the intention that I had all along to then portray that dynamic in the book, but I think it at least inspired it to a certain extent, that sometimes it just breaks out and it's like you want to kind of balance both sides. And I thought that was also, I wanted to show that our main character, Frances, even though she's very determined and has very many like positive qualities, that she's by no means a perfect person that has things figured out, but that there are always new things to figure out, mistakes to make, from which you can then learn, hopefully.
Yeah, she's not a Mary Sue.
No, that was very important to me. Yeah.
That gave her so many dimensions, though, having her sister crying on the phone to her, almost saying, I can never tell you these things because it's always about you. And it was that moment almost that opened her eyes to the fact that there is a lot of stuff outside of what you are focusing on. And she was at a turning point, and that helped her, I think. But I do, every single romance novel has the trope of the third act twist.
Yep.
And yours was slightly earlier.
Yeah, the ending is long, I think.
But the thing is, I mean, we're not going to spoil anything. I am refusing to do any spoilers, but
Mhm.
you have obviously you introduce into the mix. There aren't loads of characters, which is
Yep.
always lovely. I have reviewed books before now where I've literally got a page and a half of character names, and there's
Mhm.
so much to keep track of. But we have a very small community of people,
Yeah.
and it's almost like it's a close-knit world. Everybody knows everybody.
Mhm.
Everybody is aware of the projects that are being worked on, but nobody is stepping on anybody else's toes.
Yeah.
And it feels so relatable.
Mhm.
So was that your intention to make it, this is a small, I mean, because it's almost like it's not a closed door mystery, but it is
Mhm.
in a very isolated space because they're at a conference. There are specific people within their circle. There are specific
Mhm.
things that they are doing, and they don't move outside that very much. So was
Yeah.
that intentional, or just because you are the same as a lot of readers, you don't want to complicate things to the point, well, I'm introducing all these scientific
Mhm.
things, I don't want to introduce a cast of 7,000 to act it all
Yeah.
out.
I think it's a mix of both. So in a way, I knew very early on that I wanted to have this setting of a conference or a summer school where for a certain amount of time you basically spend every day from morning to evening with the same people. And it gets very intense, and you might not never have, like, maybe you've never seen these people before in your life, maybe you're not going to see them again, or at least until the next conference, but it's a very, very intense setting. So that's one of the things that I definitely wanted to put into this book. Also because I always feel like these kind of compressed timelines of where you meet new people and fall in love with a person very quickly, but because you see them so intensely, I always find that very enjoyable to read as a reader. So I wanted to try my hand at that. And I also couldn't have made the conference any longer because already 2 weeks is kind of stretching it in realistic terms. And yeah, then it was also a little bit of I don't want to make it more complicated. I also really wanted to give the characters that are included the kind of space that I can explore them, even if they are side characters, that I can give them a little bit more dimension. And maybe when I'm a more experienced writer, I will know how to do that with a big, big character cast. But in this case, I had the feeling that giving each of the side characters that kind of dimension was only possible if I didn't have all too many of them. So I think it was a little bit of a mix of both. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not a bad thing. I like the fact that my list of characters is short. Because it means that, as you said, you get an opportunity to learn something about them, to learn about who they are. If you'd had 20 more characters, I wouldn't have learned anything about
Yeah.
Brady. I wouldn't have found out more about the relationship, the odd relationship that Lewis has with Alice, his niece, because there wouldn't have been time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
exactly. Yeah.
it would have ended up being a 700-page novel.
Yep.
And while I love long novels, I think sometimes things like this are better being 400, 500 pages, because
Definitely.
you want that feeling of it, not insta love, but you want that feeling of rushed passion and chemistry, which sometimes you don't get if it's too long.
That's true. That's true. There needs to be some kind of, some kind of push and some kind of element that keeps you turning the pages. That is this kind of like quick rush of like falling in love and attraction. And yeah.
So
Definitely.
you said that you started writing this before Ali Hazelwood's STEM novels started coming out. So what gave you the inspiration, apart from the fact obviously it was a stress release? Is there any author that has given you inspiration to start writing this kind of novel? Because I mean, there are a large number of them, because romance actually keeps the publishing world in business.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, so one, not necessarily STEM focused, but I remember that because I'd been writing a lot as a teenager and then stopped for a while and then picked it back up in grad school. And I think the two books that I can remember most vividly that inspired me to start writing again was one, Rachel Lynn Solomon's The X Talk, which is about two people that work at a radio station, and they come up with this concept of hosting a relationship show where they pretend to be exes that candidly talk to each other about mistakes in their relationship and take listeners' questions. But the twist is that they actually have never been in a relationship before. They just don't tell their audience this, right? So it's kind of like a fake dating in the past trope, which is a very clever twist, I think. So I read that book just as it came out, and then also Elena Armas's The Spanish Love Deception, which she self-published at first. And I had been following her on her Bookstagram for a while, and also read that book right as it came out. And in the case of the X Talk, because it's this radio station setting, I felt very, very immersed in that. And that's what then gave me the idea to maybe try immerse someone else in the neuroscience setting that I knew. Whereas with Elena's book, I just really, really liked the whirlwind of that fake dating setting and the fact that she'd just started writing, and so the author, right, that she just started writing to see where it went, ended up self-publishing it. I really enjoyed reading that book. So to me, it was almost like, oh, okay, maybe I can try that too, to just start writing, figure out if I like what I'm writing, and then see if I can publish it at some point. So I think they both gave me the inspiration and also a little bit the motivation to just try and maybe fail at first, but to just try. Yeah.
Yeah. If at first you don't succeed.
Exactly.
And you said you've always been a reader. So as a child, were you on the Enid Blyton track, Pippi Longstocking, or were you reading something a little bit more in depth and intense?
So growing up, I think Enid Blyton was maybe a thing in Germany, but not so much in my circle. So my childhood literature is all kind of like what I could find in bookstores in Germany where I grew up. So Pippi Longstocking and General Astrid Lindgren was a big topic. And for some reason, I don't know why, we get a lot of Swedish children's literature in Germany translated. So there were a few other ones in that direction as well that I don't think are translated into English, but that I enjoyed very much.
Not. When I lived in Austria, the one book I was given to read by the teacher I was living with was Der Medicus.
Oh, I've seen that one. I haven't read it, but
it's
that's
anything.
Yeah.
And I only had secondary school or high school German when I went over there. And she said to me, when you can read this, you can speak German. And I'm thinking,
okay,
never then.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I haven't read that one.
I think there are a lot of books. It's the same with English. There are a lot of books that aren't translated into German or from German to English because I think the stories don't translate as well. But obviously we still have all of the fairy tales and everything because Brothers Grimm aren't English.
Exactly. Although I do feel like we have Brothers Grimm, and I grew up with those fairy tales as well, but we also have versions that are even a bit darker than that.
Oh, yes.
Like sometimes when I talk to people about kind of like children's tales we have that are really, I think it's meant for you to not do certain things, like not overeat or not, I don't know. But in the end, the kind of tales are always really grim and dark that
like
that now in retrospective I wonder like like why do we tell children these stories and scar them for life potentially?
Yes, I know. And you think, oh, everybody knows the fairy tale because they watch Disney. That's not the fairy tale that I was told.
No, same. Actually, I was never a big Disney, even as a child. I didn't watch a lot of Disney movies, so I only know that other version.
Yes.
Maybe there was too much cognitive dissonance going on for me to know that version and then see the Disney version, and just it didn't match up. I'm not sure.
I think that's the interesting thing. Everybody who loves reading has a different origin story. Mine is The Wind in the Willows when I was about 4.
Oh, okay.
Chickenpox, and it was my first chapter book. And I went from The Wind in the Willows to Stephen King.
Oh wow, that's a jump.
But as I said, everybody has their different thing. And obviously you had Pippi Longstocking was very, very popular. It was one that I read to the children I looked after when I was living over there. And in German, obviously not in English. And there were a lot of other books that I'd look at and I think, I don't recognize these authors.
Yeah.
Because they just simply did not. It wasn't that they didn't exist. They just did not over here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What about when you
Yeah,
got older
and
though? Were there books that you look at and you think, I still love this book, and you've got multiple copies of it?
it's hard to think right now because a lot of the books that I read when I was a teenager or like growing up are at my parents' place in the basement because I've moved so many times that I don't really have them around me. I do know that this is a very random one, I think, but there's one book that I reread multiple times that is called, I think, Saving Francesca. It's by an Australian author, Melina Marchetta. I don't know if how you pronounce her last name. And I randomly found it when I was 12 in the library, in the children's, well, it was kind of like, it is a YA, or today it would be categorized as a
YA.
YA book. I think I read it the first time I was 12, the German translation of it, and then every year for the next few years until I was good enough to read it in English. And I do have the English copy still on my shelf. And I really liked it because it was about a girl that goes to, I think the book starts when on the first morning that her mom doesn't get out of bed because she's kind of getting into this very heavy depression. So it's a very grim start, but it has very many kind of like positive elements. So the girl, she goes to school, she goes to this girls' school, but she also has a crush on this guy that goes to kind of like the neighboring schools. So it's also a little bit about the first time for her to fall in love with this guy, and while at the same time dealing with this quite complicated situation of her mom not being there in the way that she's used to. And she has also a younger brother, a dad that are all taking care of the situation. So you have this very interesting family dynamic kind of intertwined with new experiences that she's undergoing. And I just really loved how all of that was balanced, kind of like that mental health aspect, but also kind of beautiful new things that she experiences. And I've reread it many times since then. Yeah.
I think everybody has one of those books. Mine's The Changeover by Margaret May, who again is an Australian, well, she's a New Zealand author. So it's one of those things, I think, that we find comfort in reading, and whether that
Yeah.
is a romance or a thriller, though I'm not sure how people find comfort in thrillers, but they do, whether it's one of those or it's an old familiar, having those things around. And this book was comforting, it was cozy. There were elements in there you'd sit there going, I'm really frustrated, why isn't she just telling him that she likes him? And oh, he's such a smug person, I don't blame her for being rude to him, meaning his dad.
Yeah.
You have all of those things and they all combine to make this really comforting and cozy story, even though it's at the same time there are elements of education in there, because we're talking about things that people don't think about because they are a natural instinct, like breathing. Oh, I didn't realize. I picked up the fact that there was a sign back there saying that there's roadworks next week, but you did, and it's in the back of your head. So when you have a conversation with someone, you're going to say it to them.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have these two characters who are scarily similar, but there are enough differences because of not necessarily their upbringing, but the way that they handle things that has this chemistry bouncing off them. And I really enjoyed it for that.
I really like the idea of kind of like surprisingly finding a kindred spirit in a person that at first glance is really different from you. I kind of like that. I feel like the way that I thought of their chemistry was also that they should have enough things in common that they can really relate to each other. But the way that they, as you said, that they behave or their outlook on certain things are very different just because they're two different people, obviously, with very different backgrounds. So I think that kind of gives maybe a nice push and pull where they can relate to each other, but they also don't always understand each other.
Yeah, our differences make us stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that is truly what this is. But I honestly believe that the tagline for the book should be accepted without revisions. I've actually got it highlighted and underscored on my notepad.
Okay.
That was the one thing that stood out to me that just made me feel really sort of, you get that happy feeling in your chest.
Yeah.
That's what it gave me. Because it's nice to think that somebody accepts you that way. Oh, I don't need to change anything about you because you, to me, right at this moment, are perfect.
That's true. Yeah. No.
So what I know that this book doesn't come out until the 12th, but have you got
Yeah.
anything in the pipeline? Are you already noting things down?
I'm actually working on the next book at the moment. I'm handing in the draft at the end of this month to my editor, so there's something in the works for sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I am sticking with this one to having a woman in STEM as a main character, but the context this time is not necessarily a STEM related context. So I'm kind of pulling her out of there and putting her in a very, very different setting. So
You're taking her
yeah,
out of
I
her
think
comfort
that's
zone.
exactly very much.
I
Yeah.
this is probably a very, very silly question given your background, but are you a pantser or a preparer when it comes to writing?
Somewhere in between. I started writing a book before Love and Other Brain Experiments that I never finished. I only got about like a little under halfway through, that I plotted out completely, and then I completely lost interest in writing it because I felt like there
You
was nothing
overplanned.
interesting. Yeah, I'd overplanned. And then with this one, I had a few notes just to have a rough direction I was going in, because was still important to me, but I tried not to overplan too much and kind of try to like emulate the experience of reading as I was writing, so that I would find out more and more about the characters and more about the things that were happening as I was writing them. And that's kind of what pushed me along all the way to the end. Now with the one that I'm working on right now, I think I have planned it a tiny bit more, and I have the feeling that with the one that I'm gonna write next, it's gonna be even a bit more planned out. So I feel like I'm maybe stepping further and further into planning territory. But let's see. That might still change completely again, depending on the book. Yeah.
I think every author is so different. I've spoken with some authors who have things planned out so intricately.
Mhm.
You expect to see a a whiteboard on their wall with little red strings
Yeah.
attaching people to their character plots and their storylines. And then you've got other people who are, oh, I make a few notes here and there, and I've got some post-its stuck on my
Mhm.
screen, but that's all they've done.
Yeah.
And it's incredible how everybody gets a finished article no matter the path they take, and it's
Yeah.
all about what you're comfortable with.
Definitely. Yeah. I've also heard many people say that even when they think they have it figured out, the next one is going to be completely different again and might require them to plan more or not plan at all. So yeah, I think it's just every time it's a different experience, which is it's nice in a way, because then it stays interesting, I guess.
Absolutely. I think that is it. It's about maintaining that joy, because if you don't,
Yeah.
then it becomes a chore, and the
Mhm.
minute it becomes
For
a
sure.
chore, it is so much harder to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually for me personally, while I do like the sitting down and writing my words, not always, sometimes it's horrible because it doesn't work out. But I think the process that I find the most interesting is the one of discovering the story. And sometimes that happens on the page, sometimes it happens while I go for a walk and like think about it and listen to music. So I feel like as long as that part of like discovering the story is something that I find interesting, it doesn't really matter if it's more about the planning or the just writing and figuring out what happens.
Absolutely. I think there is such a thing as too much planning.
Yeah, definitely.
I've done the same thing. I used to write years ago, and I did
Mhm.
exactly the same thing. I would start and I'd have an entire chapter plan for every single
Mhm.
thing. And then I realized that what I was doing was procrastinating.
The writing, yeah,
Yeah,
the
I was
actual like, yeah.
procrastinating the writing by planning everything, and it was
Mhm.
disastrous.
Yeah.
Do you have a soundtrack when you're writing?
Not necessarily when I'm writing, because I can't listen to anything that has words as I'm writing. I do have a playlist that I usually listen to while I go on walks or while I get ready to write, just to get into the mood. And then often as I'm writing, I kind of, if I want any kind of background sound or music, I put on some of these like focus 25 minutes on YouTube, like lo-fi, just instrumental, more I would say electronic than actual like classical music style. But yeah, that always varies, just to have some kind of background chatter or noise.
Mine's weirdly lo-fi coffee shop.
Oh yeah, that's
The
good.
clattering of cups is for
Yeah,
some reason quite helpful.
yeah. No, I agree. That and sometimes rain noises, though I don't need them so often at the moment because we
No.
just get them by default. So
I was going to say English weather, it is chucking it down. It has been
yeah,
all day. It's lovely.
yeah.
But I mean that's really interesting though, the fact that you can't listen to anything with words while you're
Mm.
writing. I
I
think
think
that
it's
everyone's again different when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think in my case, I don't know. I mean, I know other people that can't do that, but in my case, it's also because maybe I'm not writing in my first language that I need to focus a bit more maybe on the words. And it's not that it's a conscious process of me thinking something in German and then writing it in English. That's not the case. I do write, it does come to me kind of naturally, but still, I sometimes have to think about certain meanings or synonyms or jokes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe that has something to do with it.
That makes perfect sense because while your English is incredible, it's so much better than my German. It is. I think there is a conscious shift because the
Mhm.
way that we structure our sentences, for example, is very different.
Oh
And
yeah.
when you're thinking about conversation, it has to
Mhm.
sound natural in the
Yep.
language that you're writing in, and it doesn't
Mhm.
always sound the same in your head.
For sure, yeah, yeah. I especially notice that when at some point, whenever I'm at a certain stage with a draft, I start reading it out loud to me. And that's also where I sometimes catch these things of like, oh, actually in my head that sounded okay, but when I read it out loud, it makes no sense, or just the emphasis is kind of weird, so it doesn't really come across. And yeah, for sure.
English is one of those languages. It seems so as though it should be so easy to learn, but it's not.
When you get into the weeds of it, no, I feel
No,
like, yeah.
sentence structure is very different, and we have.
Mhm.
I always use the same example: 222.
Yep.
Said the same, spelt differently, all have different meanings.
Yeah, horrible. It's actually
But
something I think in German we have a little bit of that as well. My partner, he's from Spain, so you kind of like pronounce everything the way it's written. There's no ambiguity there. And I remember that we at some point watched a show where they had a spelling bee competition in an American kind of setting, right?
yeah,
And he was so puzzled that that would exist because obviously you know how you spell things because there's one way to spell them and that's it. And I was like, no, I think I think in certain cultures these competitions make sense and others they don't. But yeah.
the funny thing is though, in American they don't put in additional U's and A's and
Yeah.
E's where we do.
That's true. That's true. I'm constantly confused between like American and English, like British English while I'm writing as well. So
It's
yeah.
one of those things. It's a wonderful language, very versatile, but also incredibly difficult to teach
Yeah, agree.
or learn. And we always think
Yeah.
that, oh, it's the language everyone speaks. It's like, yes, then they are far more intelligent than we are because we tend to only speak one language. But
Yeah.
I think that it is the fact that English isn't your first language is, and that sounds so condescending, but it is incredible. I don't know many people who would sit there and say,
Yeah.
I wrote my entire first novel in a language that wasn't mine.
Yeah. I
But
think for me, it wasn't a big decision actually to write it in English because I was always working. So the scientific context was always in English. So my thesis, everything, talking to my advisors, all of that was in English. So to me, it seemed almost natural to carry that on. And also because I'd been reading most of the, or almost, I think all of the romance books that I'd read at that point were in English. So it felt kind of natural to just write in that language and not try in German. But yeah, sometimes it makes it a bit more complicated.
especially when you're thinking about, I mean, the fact that your main character is German
Mhm.
helped.
Yeah, that's true.
I
That's
could
true.
hear her voice with a German accent, not necessarily
Okay.
sure which one it was, but I could hear it in a
Maybe
German
from Bonn.
accent because there were certain things that the way she thought and the way she perceived
Mhm.
things that they didn't, that sounds awful, they didn't come across as English.
Okay.
And I mean,
Interesting.
as an English reader, we are so used to reading things that have been written by an American audience.
Mhm.
And there is actually a big difference between America and the UK,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
not
for
only
sure.
in what they consider funny, but also in the way that they write things and the way that they say
Mhm.
things. So I wouldn't say we've adapted, but a lot of our media consumption is American.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Yes.
the same the world over.
Hmm.
I went
Yeah.
out with a German boy when I was in my young teens. And when he spoke English, he had an American accent.
Wow. Okay, I feel like most Germans that I know actually have British accents because that's the English that we mostly learn in school.
But his
Um,
teacher was apparently an American.
okay,
His
interesting.
accent was very American when he spoke English, but
Mhm.
he spoke English 20 times better than I spoke German. And it made me kind of ashamed.
We start early, so I think that helps.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
By the time you get to gymnasium, you are advanced. And by the time we reach
Yes.
the same age, we are not. That's so
Yeah.
bad. I think we're just lazy. I'd love to read more about Ben, have to be honest. If I'm looking through the characters, I think Ben and Brady would be an interesting combination, but I think Brady's probably too old for him.
Yeah. I think she wouldn't be interested in him now that I think about it, maybe.
But he needs
Brady,
someone like her because he
yeah.
is far too intense for somebody who's just graduated.
Yeah.
But I think he has the
Definitely.
same pressures that Lewis had.
Hmm. Yeah, and dealt with them in a different way, I guess. But yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I think strangely, Lewis rebelled.
Yeah.
And he rebelled and went into a very, very structured and strict
Yeah, environment.
Yes, absolutely. But I loved this book, and
Thank
every
you.
time I look at it, I think this is something that I enjoyed it because it was different, but it wasn't, oh, I'm being stuck in something that I'm never going to understand, because there were those elements of, I'm not talking down to you, I'm simplifying it because this is in layman's terms, this, and this, think about it in that way. And that's how she explained it to the students that she spoke with at the conference. So I greatly appreciated that because it's something that I hadn't ever thought about.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah,
But it
that's
gave
so
me
nice to hear.
something to consider.
Yeah, no, I'm
And
happy to hear that.
yeah, I think that anyone who can write a book, to be honest, I'm jealous of, because I just don't have I used to think I have the time and the energy to do it, and then I write about 5 pages and I go, no, I think I'll just read a book.
Yeah. Yeah, you
I'll
need
read
a lot of
that isn't
patience.
mine.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on and talking about this and a lot of other things. So where can people find you on socials, and do you have a website that people can check out the book and where they can buy it from?
Yes, so my socials, I'm on Instagram and Threads under Hannah Brohm, so HANNAHBROHM, and then on TikTok on hannah.brohm, and then also my website is hannahbrohm.com, and there you also find the links to the books, you find the link to my newsletter, and I think that about covers it. But it was so nice talking to you. I had such a good time, so thank you so much for having me.
It was my absolute pleasure. It was lovely to talk to you about this book. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I've been promising my niece that she can borrow it from when I've spoken with you. So,
oh, great. I hope she enjoys it too.
She's into this. She's in this period of her reading life at the moment.
Okay. Great. Then I think it's a good match, probably.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for coming on, and I will share all these links, and good luck on release day, both in the US
Thank you
and
so much.
over here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's it for this week. And again, thank you to Hannah Brohm for taking time out to talk to me about Love and Other Brain Experiments, which is out on the 12th of February. Go and get yourself a copy now. And thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, why not share it with friends or family and leave a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you might listen. You can find me on Instagram at Being Bookish Pod, on X at Being_Bookish, and on TikTok at Being Bookish Reviews. Prefer reading? Head over to my website beingbookish.co.uk for spoiler-free reviews, my 2026 reading tracker, and all the links to the podcast in one place. Until next time, this is me saying farewell.